This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Gridiron Heroics Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean, and today we are here to talk about the fallout from Week 17 of the NFL season. To help me do that, we have Nick Merriam, our lead draft analyst. How you doing today, man?
I've had better weekends. Kind of saw this one coming, though, eventually.
You and me both. And we have Noah Ashley, our producer, helping us out. Big shout out to him. You can find him on Twitter at NoAshTraySports. I mean, I don't think we need to beat around the bush. We're a little dejected. Both of our teams were eliminated from playoff contention officially yesterday. Both were very winnable games and both fell short. But it is what it is. The final playoff picture is starting to come together. We've had a little bit of shifting around, a couple of exits, a couple of entrances, a couple of teams moving up or down. Tonight is still a very big game in terms of the playoff implications because it could help decide who the number one seed in the AFC might be. It could help the Bengals potentially lock up the AFC North a week early. But let's get into it. I mean, first and foremost, I guess we can give a quick farewell to the teams that were officially eliminated from the playoffs yesterday. From the AFC, we had the Jets become officially eliminated after losing to the Seahawks. We also had the who else was officially
Raiders, I believe.
The Raiders, too, because they lost to the San Francisco 49ers.
I think that might be it.
Those are the only two that were officially eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Steelers, they linger after their victory. And
so does Tennessee.
Tennessee lingers because of their possibility to win the NFC South. Mm-hmm. The Browns were eliminated last week, as well as Colts a little while ago. Okay, so that's it. And then in the NFC, we lost the Washington Commanders. We lost the Saints. We lost the Panthers. And we lost the Falcons.
They might have already been eliminated. I'm not certain, but
the Falcons?
I don't know, yeah.
I think technically all four teams still had the ability to win the NFC South.
Okay.
Leading up to yesterday. So we lost the entire NFC South. We lost the Commanders. And I believe that's it in terms of teams that were officially eliminated.
Yep.
Teams that moved into the playoff picture, New England Patriots, after their win over the Dolphins. Teams that moved out, the Dolphins, after the loss to the Patriots. The Seahawks moved in after their win over the Jets, and the Commanders went from being in to being eliminated outright. The Lions and the Packers remain in contention for the final NFC wildcard spot. The Dolphins and Steelers remain in contention for the final AFC wildcard spot, and the Titans remain in contention for the AFC South. The Chargers leaped over the Baltimore Ravens to go from the 6th seed to the 5th seed after their win and the Ravens' loss. And that's the only movement. Oh, no, the 49ers also overtook the Vikings and now have the number 2 seed, the Vikings, dropping down to the number 3, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing at this point. But, so some of your main takeaways from this weekend, I mean, what do you want to talk about first? You want to talk about the teams that are still in the mix, that are fighting for their playoff lives, and then maybe we can come back to the teams that were eliminated afterwards, talk about the draft order a little bit.
I mean, just because we brought up the 6 teams that got eliminated, I kind of want to just touch on them really quick. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but just I think situationally, like some of these teams are different spots. Obviously, it's very disappointing the Jets didn't make it. I think it's a very talented football team. The AFC compared to the NFC this year is just a loaded conference. I think if you put any of these teams that have been competing for that last wild card spot in the NFC race, they probably get the 6th seed at the very least. Like I think, it was crowded, and they were one of the teams that gets pushed out. Had some injuries here late in the year, and it's tough. And I think, quite honestly, going forward, very positive for the Jets. Like I think, it's unfortunate you don't get to watch them play a football game here in mid-January, but they will be an attractive landing spot for any top quarterback. And if they find average play at that position, they're going to be a team that can win in game. Really. And this year, at times they were that. Your rhythm kind of gets thrown off when you have to make changes at the most important position week in and week out. The Raiders, I mean, they kind of gave up. I mean, Stidham, gave them a shot this week. But I think we all were not really expecting them to make much of a playoff push at that point. They're going to run it back next year. It might not be Derek Carr. It's probably not Derek Carr. It might be Jimmy Garoppolo. It might be Tom Brady. It could be Stidham. It could be a guy they draft. I think they're going to run a lot of these players back, though, with McDaniels. They're kind of forced to, financially to do that. And I don't think – I think people would call this like a major disappointment season for the Raiders. I do think it's a disappointment, but ultimately, they're going to end up 6-11 probably with a loss to the Chiefs. I think a good season for them probably would have been 9 wins with the division they're playing in, and just, reasonably, the roster's better than it's been in years, but it's not fantastic. Still, they have a lot of things they need to fix still. I just think, you lose a bunch of close games, you blow a bunch of leads in games that you had big leads in, and this is what happens. I don't think they're, in tear down mode, but it's an unfortunate outcome for them just based on some of the games they lost this year where they had big leads. NFC South is just, we kind of knew the Bucs were going to win this division eventually. Carolina really gave a nice push. Sam Darnold playing very well at the end of the year here is just kind of wild. I still think they're going to go get a QB, especially now after the way CJ Stroud played this week. You have to be more excited about him as a prospect. Them in Atlanta, New Orleans, probably all looking at like potentially quarterback landing spots. Not all teams that have some interesting players, they're not fully built rosters, but if they somehow hit on a quarterback, and these teams could be contending for wild card spots. Although the Saints have all their financial issues, it means they're not going to be able to add to their roster much this year. But not surprising that any of these teams are knocked out. Washington just, it's they had a lot of injuries on defense late in the year. We talked like 2 weeks ago. Cam Curl, like I said, should be an all-pro consideration guy. He's not going to be because he's 7th rounder pick. But he gets hurt. Early in the year, they didn't have him for 2 games, and there were all these coverage busts. He gets hurt, and the same thing happens again. Tons of coverage busts these past 2 weeks. Defense couldn't really hold down the fort. And then offensively, just, the same stuff all year. And then they try to go to Carson Wentz, and it's kind of what we expected when the trade was made. Just he isn't a guy that you want to put in a position of, we need you to play well to get us a win against the team late in the season to make the playoffs end. Really, really bad game offensively from them against Cleveland. And here we are. We're staring at elimination with a week still left in the season, which I think, even a month ago, I would have been shocked if you said that. But ultimately, they weren't built to win games in the current NFL this way. It's just hard to win the way they were. And, you stumble in a game against the Giants that you probably needed to win, and you made it difficult for yourselves to finish off the season as a playoff team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what we saw this past weekend was just the reiteration of the need for a top quarterback to win you the biggest games. I mean, a lot of these teams that were almost there. I mean, you talk about the Commanders, you talk about the Jets, you talk about the Saints, you talk about the Panthers. They all, had strengths to their roster. They all had things that they were doing well at some point in the season. But every single one of those teams had an established quarterback. I mean, every single one of the teams that beat them had an established quarterback. And I guess, that can come from an unusual place, whether it's Geno Smith or Tom Brady in his 40s. But you've got to get a real guy, I think, to compete. Just going team by team, the Jets are. It was tough for them because I think this is just proof that probably Mike White isn't the guy that you should be trusting going forward. I think he had an opportunity to prove it. Unfortunately for him, I think the rib injury affected his accuracy yesterday. And for him, that's such an important part of his game. You know what I mean? Like quick decisions, quick strike, accurate balls. And it just wasn't that yesterday. And their offensive line has just been too injured. It's a major problem. And the defense wasn't locked down. It was still pretty good, but not locked down. And they couldn't account for the offensive struggles. I mean, the Commanders, Wentz was putting the ball in harm's way. I mean, I think the probably the positive here is that there's got to be no chance that they're bringing him back after yesterday's performance, and that was something that you were kind of worried about. The Saints, I mean, the Saints, they're such a weird one. I don't even know if I can easily summarize them because of the amount of money that they have invested, and like it'll be tougher for them to make the little pivots this offseason to revamp the roster in a way that would make them better than what they finished this season as. I think 7-9 is probably reasonable to have expected from them. I think their top out was probably 10 wins. Their bottom out was probably around 7 just based on how many good players they have, but they are just getting older year by year, and they just don't have a way to increase that top out, and they're only going to have a lower bottom out, I think, as time goes on. The Browns, I mean, you saw Deshaun Watson play probably a little bit more than I did because I was watching all the games early, and then I had to do some stuff, so I couldn't watch every single game all the way. So, I mean, he clearly did enough to win the game. Did he look better than the past few weeks?
It was kind of the same. I mean, he escaped a lot of pressures, which was kind of the big thing he did this week. You know, broke some sacks, tackles to deliver some throws, but it was a lot of, man coverage, miscommunications at a bunch. Just hit the wide open Amari Cooper. There was a touchdown pass. It was just like a comeback to Cooper, and Fuller missed a tackle, and it was 2-man, and the high safety on one side just for some reason rotated the wrong way, and so Cooper just ran down the sideline. There was no one there. There was a lot of bad defensively from Washington, and then Amari Cooper just being savvy enough to score 3 touchdowns, I think, or something like that, and win the game.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with him because he's obviously the biggest question there. Panthers are an interesting one. I think that their stability is more questionable than the Jets because they don't know who the coach is going to be. I don't think they're quite as talented as the Jets right now, but I don't think it's that far off. They have a good offensive line. They have skill players. They have some decent guys on the defensive front and, some players there. So I don't want to say they're a quarterback away because I hate it when people say that because it's just never really true. But they are one of those teams that needs to find a quarterback and make some small adjustments and then get the backbone in place of the quarterback, decide who the GM is going to be. Are they going to retain their guy? Are they going to bring in a new guy? Are they going to find a new head coach? Are they going to bring back Wilkes after how well he's done? These questions need to be answered, but I think they're an interesting team for next season. I would be more likely to expect a well-run version of them to make the playoffs than what the Bucs are right now, especially since we don't know what Brady's going to be. The Raiders need work. They need work defensively. They need work on their offensive line. They don't know who their quarterback is going to be. I think they're a team with shiny pieces that's lacking a lot of the depth of the roster. Mm-hmm. And that was before the quarterback questions came into play. So I don't know. We'll talk about the quarterback carousel coming up, but there's going to be a lot of moving parts, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are and where some of these guys finally end up.
Yeah. And, we have all these questions about Washington this morning because the fan base is rightfully very angry. Everyone's calling for everyone to get fired. And, I think schematically, there's an argument that Rivera has really let down this roster and has not really been accountable for himself enough in terms of that. The issue is you're about to have a team sale, and you can't just fire all these people and then have all these contracts that need to get paid out. So
Mhm.
it's probably not going to happen. I don't know. This is going to be a very weird offseason for Washington. It might just be like one where the ownership changes and we kind of see not much change on the team just so that that can take place. And then we kind of see that this happens again, and then we just fire everyone after next year. And then we actually see what the plan is, but which is tough because fans don't want to hear that. But
Yeah, in terms of the NFL schedule itself, or I mean, NFL schedule, I was reading that when I said that. In terms of the actual roster itself, they have quite a bit of talent, especially at some key positions. They've got a lot of receiver talent. They've got pass rush talent. Um, they've got some back end talent in the secondary, and Jamin Davis is playing better. So it doesn't take that many pieces to turn this into a more competitive roster season long, but it's the most important one. That's that question, and I think we have a few teams that are kind of there. I think the Commanders, the Panthers, and the Jets are kind of all that right now.
yeah, and I'm excited. Sam Howell's going to play this week, and I'm excited to see how that looks. I know it's going to be tough because it's Dallas and the O-line hasn't played well, but quite honestly, he has to clear the bar of, to be honest with you, Heineke was a better quarterback this year. Everyone, I hated the Wentz trade, but my thing was at least, hey, this roster's solid. I think he's a little bit better than Heineke. If they get a slight upgrade at QB, they might be a playoff team. And guess what? He wasn't better than Heineke. Heineke was the better quarterback for this team this year. It's just, it's unfortunate that he's, was able to basically bottom out as a player, but it did happen. So if you're Sam Howell, I mean, this week, show some mobility, do what Heineke can do in terms of avoiding some of these pass rushers. And then, do you have the arm talent to kind of make some of these downfield throws? I don't know, but I don't think it would take him doing a whole lot to barely make this offense look better. Some people are very skeptical about that, but the bar is very low at quarterback for this team. And I think it's frustrating because it's not like this team has had average quarterback play. It's like they have literally bottom of the league quarterback play 3 years in a row right now. And, if you see anything more than that, I mean, you've won 7 games in 3 straight years. Like anything more, like you're a playoff team any of these years. I guess they were 2 years ago, but barely. And it's just that comes back ultimately to Rivera and, those people making the calls and decisions because they're the ones who brought in these quarterbacks. Fitzpatrick injury is unfortunate, but, you could have traded up for Justin Fields and they didn't want to. They had a trade in place. They decided not to do it. And then Carson Wentz was your plan this year. And,
Yeah, I think there are some decisions where you can't fathom how they talked themselves into it. You know what I mean? It's like for a lot of these, you're like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can see why they talked themselves into it. I just don't know what about Wentz's performance over these past few years made that seem like a good idea. I really genuinely don't. Wentz is not going to be a starter anywhere anymore. That's obviously over. But we can talk about who the genuine starting quarterbacks who may be available will probably be. But let's talk about some of these teams that are actually in the playoffs that still have life, that are still probably going to end up, making some real noise down the line. So I guess we can just stay in the NFC for a minute because I think the first thing is that this Eagles team, they showed a little bit of vulnerability, I think, today. And look, Jalen Hurts is definitely a much better quarterback, but I think the loss of Lane Johnson mattered.
Yeah, I think that mattered more, quite honestly, because they didn't have Dallas is a better defense than the Saints. They're kind of built similarly in terms of their pass rush first and like some couple of really good players on the back end, but not like the entire secondary is built. And they just, this is the first time they've had an offensive line injury all year. And just like apparently depth is an issue,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's tough to have, a guy who can come in and replace who we deem to be an all-pro right tackle. You know what I mean?
Well, yes.
So, like, even if you have depth, like, there's going to be a notable drop-off. And I think if you have a backup quarterback in, the drop-off from all-pro right tackle to your backup is probably a little bit more noticeable, you know what I mean, than if you're going from, a right tackle who's just fine or average with, an elite quarterback back there who can account for it a little bit. I think when you start to have attrition at your best player positions and you're also playing your backup, then, you're going to see that a little bit more. Do you have any idea, being from, the NFC South or any NFCs, do you have any idea what Jalen Hurts' outlook is, or is it still very much up in the air for this coming week?
I mean, from what I can tell, they just want to give him as much time as possible. So I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see him until playoffs. Like again, they lost this week. I think maybe the game plan this week in terms of having an injury in the offensive line wasn't perfect for what they were going to deal with. New Orleans had one of their, better games as a pass rush unit in weeks, and it's a good unit, but like this was their high end. I think, they could still easily beat the Giants with Hartman Minshew, and they probably would be favored by more than a touchdown, even so. And then, they're going to get set for a playoff game with Hurts. I think that ultimately, if you're the Eagles staff right now, you're ready for the playoffs. Like regardless of what it's going to be, you need your quarterback as healthy as possible.
Yeah, no, I mean, I tend to agree with that. I think for them to lose out of that number one seed would probably be pretty frustrating after the season that they've had, because the 49ers are right there. And I mean, I trust them after what they've done. I think that they're probably going to win. Eagles have to play the Giants, and then the 49ers have to play the Cardinals. I mean, if the Eagles don't win, the 49ers certainly are going to beat this Cardinals team and potentially take the number one seed.
Well, and they have to worry about Dallas too, winning the division, because if they beat Washington, the Eagles lose, which they're probably going to beat Washington.
I would imagine, yes,
would not win the division. Will. But I don't. Daboll says the Giants are going to play their starters. They might not play them the whole game. They don't have any. They can't move at all in the standings to the playoffs. They're not really playing for anything. I think, the Eagles are probably more likely to lose than Dallas or the Niners, but I don't think it's very likely they're going to lose next week.
Well, we shall see. We can preview that game more in depth as the week goes on. But so what about the Giants? I mean, it was the Colts, but it was a resounding win. So how do we feel about the Giants? I mean, it's like, how everything is here in the NFL. Everything is incredibly reactionary. Everything is, recency bias out the wazoo. Now, apparently, Daniel Jones is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC, right? So that's those are the takes, leaving this week. So where are they, in your opinion, as a team? What is their opportunity to really compete?
They are going to be a team that I think has a shot to win a playoff game. Like I fully believe that. Now, I thought that would have been the case for honestly any of these teams who are in this wild card chase, including Washington. I maybe take the Giants a little more seriously than I did. I probably didn't take them as seriously as any of these other teams, and now I'm probably kind of like, all right, they deserve to be where they are. And if they play the Vikings, I honestly think they have a very good shot at winning that game. If they play the Niners, probably not as much, but I'd give them a slight chance. They've stuck to their guns, like what they're good at. They just continue to do that, and if it works for them in a game, then it'll work. The Colts, they did what they were supposed to against Indy. This Indy team has been absolutely snake bitten ever since they took a 33-0 lead against the Vikings. They've been outscored, 33-3 in the second half of that game, 20-3 by the Chargers. Chargers didn't even play that good in that game, and they still got blown out. And then the Giants, I think, really you saw one of their best offensive performances in years. And it's a lot of schematic stuff. I mean, you're seeing Daboll's vision, kind of how this offense can thrive, work. They're using Jones on, these different types of run plays, and you're seeing other quarterbacks. The quarterback sweep is like a big part of their offense. They're setting it up with all these RPOs, kind of these like stretch plays going one way or the other, and then all of a sudden you have three tight ends set to the right, and then you just run sweep to the weak side, and it's wide open for Jones to use his speed and get into the end zone. You have this big guy running downhill, and then Barkley, didn't even have maybe the most impactful game, but still mattered in that game. Defensively, Kayvon Thibodeau is forgetting all the other stuff, all the other drama that happened yesterday with the celebration, but just he's been absolutely huge for them these last month and a half, maybe, probably showing why he could have been edge one in this draft and maybe should have been more in the discussions, barring off field stuff. But that development of Thibodeau playing the way he has, I think changes their outlook because they kind of have this one player on defense that can make a big game changing play whenever they need it. And that's different for them.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what they do. I mean, as it stands, as the number 6 seed, they'd have to face off against the Vikings, and I think that's a winnable game for them. I mean,
very winnable.
I'll be honest. Look, I think Justin Jefferson would be able to do some damage against them because I don't think that their secondary is, they don't have a Jair Alexander on the roster. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? They don't have a Pat Surtain. They don't have a Sauce Gardner. They don't have a guy who matches up like that. And he leads the league in receiving for a reason. There's almost nobody that locks him down. So I think keeping that specific matchup in mind, it might be tough for them. They will be able to move the ball, though, because the Vikings defense is not very good. But realistically, I think that's not the worst matchup for them to actually enter the playoffs as their first round challenge. I think after that, it's probably a little bit tough. It's crazy to me that this team is where it is and doing what it's doing. I think it was crazy. We kind of got used to it. Kind of seemed like they might fall out. They had a few struggles sort of in the midst of the season, but the way that they're closing it's quite impressive, and it is definitely a less challenging conference. There's no doubt about that, but that really shouldn't take away from the way that they look out there. They're passing the eye test with flying colors, at least in terms of, how prepared they are and how well they're executing and what they're doing with what they have. So
the thing that gets me with them is that I think they're going to be one of the most difficult teams to evaluate this offseason of any team we've had to evaluate in years because they really don't have a ton of assets. Their cap is kind of an issue. They have the draft picks this year, which is good, but the roster's still effectively kind of in rebuild mode. Like they're upgrading a lot of positions. And the question is, all right, is this did they hit their variance this year or did they legitimately coach this roster up to being as good? And maybe some of the pieces exist on the roster now that we weren't aware of because of how bad the coaching was prior versus how it is now. And so the question will be, if this team shows up next year and they win 10 games again, we have to really take them seriously. But there's a chance, honestly, they re-sign Jones, they bring guys back, and they just say, we're good. And they're, a 5-win team because the roster probably isn't as good as it looks right now. Or maybe they do, make some really good moves this offseason, add a bunch of players. But then does that make them a 12-win team now because of the coaching added with good players? Or is it still a 9-win team? And then we're like, okay, well, maybe they, they're better now, but 2 years ago, maybe they weren't as good. And then, you know what I'm saying? It's just kind of, I don't know how much the coaching is impacting what they're doing right now versus how it was previous years. And then how much does that stay year to year? Because we could see Bill Belichick do it with honestly not a great roster in New England. So the discussion becomes then, is Brian Daboll a Belichick Tomlin type coach? And if he is, they're going to win. They're going to win 8-9 games at the minimum every single year. But
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, and maybe there's something to be said for a player like Daniel Jones who, managed to stick around as a starter long enough for us to see him in his 4th year, and he'll get a little bit better and a little bit better. Would he be the kind of player who would be Geno Smith in a couple of years? You know what I mean? With a little more time. I don't know. A lot of guys don't get the opportunity to get that far. And Saquon, there's a lot of variance with a guy like that. I mean, what do they do with him next year? Do they bring him back, and are they going to rely on him the way they did this year? Because if that's the case, we don't know what that's going to look like, because one injury changes the impact a player like that can have. But did you say that they don't have a lot of money?
Aren't they up against the cap?
They are the 3rd most loaded in terms of space.
Really?
Okay. Yes.
I thought
They're
because they paid all these guys recently, they were in trouble for a little bit. But
no, they basically took like they just they put their chin out. They took the punch on the chin this offseason, and they couldn't really do anything but to give themselves flexibility in the future. They refused to like double down on guys the way that the Saints did to make space. So they're just like, we're just gonna eat it this year,
Mhm.
and we're gonna give ourselves that flexibility as soon as possible instead of kicking the can. So
So
they
what's interesting about that though is like, okay, we're talking about Jones and Saquon extensions, which even though they're probably gonna be cheaper than most of those position players get paid, that are like, well, not Saquon, like those are big contracts, right? And then you got Andrew Thomas coming up. That's gonna be a massive contract. Dexter Lawrence, that's gonna be a massive contract. And then you got to start thinking like, okay, well, Kenny Galladay's probably got to be gone at some point here. Leonard Williams is probably going to have to be gone at some point here. Adoree Jackson's probably going to have to be gone at some point. Like it's just, they're kind of in a weird spot where because they waited so long with the last regime to figure out what they were going to do, they're like paying players who ended up being good from the last regime, and they don't like they'll be able to go pay some free agents. I don't think they're going to be able to break the bag for anyone as much as they would want to maybe this offseason is what I'm saying.
well, look, I mean, I don't think that you should ever.
Yeah, you're right. We've had discussions about this too.
Yeah, I don't think that
So rated to
like.
do that.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think you want to be in the position where the Bears are, where you need to go out and sign a billion players. I think I'd much rather be in the position where the Giants are, at least from a total roster perspective, where you have good players and you can use some of that money on yourself. It gives you flexibility. I mean, so they're currently projected to have about 56 million in cap space. If they cut Kenny Galladay outright, they free up another 6.7. If they did a post June 1, they'd have a little bit more if they wanted to. And so, that puts them around 60, 64, 65 million. In available space. I mean, I don't think you ever really need more than that, at least not like with where the total cap is right now. If you wanted to restructure Leonard Williams, if you're like, we're confident that he's going to be on our team, you can free up at most around 8 more million there if you wanted to. Andrew Thomas is just entering his 4th year. They're certainly going to pick up his 5th year option. So it's like you have another year between now and when you'd have to give him an extension if you want to. So there's really no crunch there. Dexter Lawrence is a guy that you're probably going to need to extend. Did they pick up his 5th year option already? Let me just double check.
I don't know if they did. It's a question. Probably.
Yeah, they did. And
Okay.
his cap hits at about 12 million. But if you give him an extension, if you so chose, you could
Cut it
lower
down.
his cap
Yep.
hit. So, like, they are financially speaking, and in terms of roster talent speaking, they're in a pretty decent place. They need to decide if they want to do Daniel Jones or not. For Saquon, I mean, my kind of cutthroat mentality would just be franchise tag him. But I don't know, for Daniel Jones, that's a tougher one. I mean, I think you'd be interested in bringing him back, but if his agents are driving a hard bargain, then I think you just need to be smart. Their self scouting has been very impressive so far, so I'm curious to see how that applies to these two players in particular. But in terms of flexibility, financially, they're in a great spot, I would say.
Yeah, and then I mean, obviously, I think at this point you kind of want to find a way to bring Saquon back. I think tag is absolutely the right thing to do. I get a little worried here if they decide to make him the highest paid running back in the NFL, just because we'll have our discussions about that. But not that you don't want that guy around, but I would almost definitely be trying to find a way to have that contract have outs early on, just because he's looked great this year, but let's be honest, like the guy had multiple injuries and it kind of took him a while to like figure that out. If he has another one,
Yeah, well, I mean, as a team, what I would do is I'd be like, look, we'll what we'll do is we'll give him a contract that's essentially the equal value to 2 franchise tags, and no guarantees beyond that. No injury guarantees beyond that. You know what I mean? Because that is basically what we would pay if we franchise tagged him twice. It gives you at least 1 extra year of guarantees versus what you would actually get being franchise tagged twice, but we're not doing anything more than that. I mean, that's what I would try and get done if I was the team. I think that's reasonable, and I think, because I think you step back and you look at it, and even if he plays well next year and got hurt, you'd still consider franchise tagging him one more time to try and get that out of him. So you're kind of like, that's probably what the resulting outcome would be for all sides. So it's like, it just gives a modicum of additional guarantee to the player, and doesn't put the team in a bad situation. That's what I would try and do. But I mean, the quarterback, it just depends on what else is kind of happening around the league. That's never really a vacuum
I
conversation.
think that's the cutthroat part of this business. I think it's completely unfair. It's just that Saquon Barkley's a better football player by almost all accounts than Daniel Jones. I don't know that Jones isn't more valuable for them right now, just because he's a floor at the most important position. And the way that this team is coached, they could probably add another running back and make up a lot of what Barkley's doing, with the fact that Jones's running ability is like also a big part of their offense now.
Well, I mean, certainly, and you can probably find a player like that in the second round of the draft.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you look back and history tells us that you're probably going to be able to find the J.K. Dobbins or Kenneth Walker.
I
just draft too.
I keep thinking, like, there's more guys declaring than I thought at that position, and like there are guys in the 5th round that I'm going to think could start day one. It's a ridiculous running back draft this year.
So yeah, I mean, again, I'm not saying don't bring him back, but I think anything more than what I offered would probably be a bit of a mistake. I have to double check exactly what the math would break down for that, but I think that's...
Well, the tag this year's 9, so I'd have to assume next year it's like, what, 11, 12? How does that work?
It depends. It's like, you can't necessarily just project it based on what it is this year, because the tag is... It's based on the highest salaries at a position, and there's different ones for different tags.
So like a safe estimate, it's probably like 223, 24, for a contract that you'd offer. Maybe
that's probably a little high, honestly. But like, I mean, I don't know if they went 2 for 22, then that's probably like...
It's very, very. I mean, if they do that, I think that's a good one for the Giants. Honestly, it's probably good for both sides, but you worry that Saquon thinks he could get a lot more on the open market. And
I mean, it's tough because you look at the other deals, and like a lot of the guys are getting 12.5 million is kind of the going rate for like the Derrick Henrys and the Aaron Joneses. Like, I think it's around 12.5 million. So it's like, does he push for that? But also, you see, like, no one pays running backs on the open market. These are all extension only deals, but I don't know, because the Giants just seem like a very... I think it would be a little premature to say this, but it seems like they're
smart,
they're intelligent, and they're forward thinking, and if they live in the same world they're living in right now, they would be an Eagles or Ravens type organization that's like
Bills,
always a step ahead of them of the rest of the league, because they're self-aware and they don't talk themselves into non-reality. So we'll see. I mean, again, only time will tell, but it seems like they might be that kind of organization, which is it's cool for Giants fans, because they haven't been that in a while. They've been stuck in the past for a long time. But I mean, as interesting as the Giants are, we've got to talk about some of these other teams here.
Yeah, they are fascinating.
Okay, how about the Bucks? How about the Bucks game? How about where they are right now as a team going into these playoffs? I mean, I think... this is why you don't want to play Tom Brady in a must-win situation. I think
he screwed me in fantasy because I didn't start him. I started him last week in my semifinal, and didn't do anything. And then this week, I didn't. It was third place, and I still won. But if I had to start him in the final, it would have been rough because he popped up. But yeah, I look, I have a lot of friends who are casual football fans. I think it's like the majority of football fans are casual fans who don't really like, dive into things the way we do. But a lot of people are like, oh, Brady's not playing that well this year. And it's like, yeah, like it's one of his worst years in his career. And he's still like, well, I guess his worst year since like 2005 when he finally started actually playing good football. But we don't ever talk about that. But yeah, he's still playing like good, like better than Daniel Jones. Like it's just, he's far too good of a player, even at his worst, for this team to bottom out to the point where they don't win this terrible division, and look, their defense is making some big plays, at least when it matters, late in games. And they have Mike Evans, like they have star players all over this roster. They're just basically at this point, because they can't coach them up, begging somebody to make a play. And as it turns out, like they have enough guys who are capable of it that they just do at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because I don't want the recency bias of what happened to totally affect my opinion of the team, because it is the Panthers too at the same time. Like, even though I'm overall positive.
Well, I think the Panthers are playing good football right now. Like, I think the Panthers.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there's also a reason that Mike Evans didn't do this against the majority of other teams this year. Like, they're not quite complete enough. They've got J.C. Horn, who is their starter on the other side. I think Dante Jackson is out.
Yeah,
so
Panthers corner too.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, I didn't again watch every play of the game, but like that's looked to me like that's who he was abusing. So I just want to keep it honest, because there's going to be better players that he has to match up against. Right now, that would be the Dallas Cowboys, and that offensive line in Tampa is not great. And
it's week one, but they did really shut down that offense week one.
Yeah. Well, wait, yeah, but didn't Dak get hurt?
He got hurt very late, like when the game was over already, basically.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it takes. I don't want to use week one for.
I don't either, but
for anything, because I just don't.
I think that they're going to be Dallas is going to be like 2.5 point favorites on the road, and I think that's fair. I think the Bucs have. I like the Bucs at home against Dallas better than I would like Minnesota at home against Dallas on wildcard weekend.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. I think they could get hot at any moment.
Yeah,
and maybe we saw the beginning of that.
Well, I think that they're going to play a close, probably high scoring, highly emotional game against Dallas. The winner of that game, it's going to be very entertaining. The winner of that game is probably going to go to Philly and lose by 30, because they're going to just be drained. That game is probably going to be a Sunday kickoff, because Fox is probably going to pick that game because it's the Cowboys. It'll be a 4:00 kickoff, and then the Eagles game. Well, I guess if it's Dallas, Philly, that'll probably be like a late Sunday, but there's a chance it's like a Saturday. And if it's 5 days of rest and you're going into Philly, like I just, I think that lines up for a letdown the next week. But I do think Dallas is going to win that game, but I think Tampa will make it tough for them.
We'll see. I mean, I definitely trust Tom Brady more than I trust Dak Prescott. And I'm not a Dak Prescott hater.
He's kind of doing this late season thing again, where it's like he's playing well, but there's a lot of turnovers. It's almost Fitzpatrick-y.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the turnovers are an issue. They are. And it just kind of seems like if they're not generated via interception, like they'll just come. Like the fumble he had on Thursday night, it was the center exchange, but it's like it looked to me like he was just running away from the center before the ball got there. Like it's like you've got to be better than that if you want to win playoff games. So, I know Kyron is he's very vocally anti-Dak in terms of like the trust factor that he has in him. So
well, the only problem I have with Dak is just he plays his best football in like October and September, and it's reasonably like that shouldn't matter when you're evaluating a guy, but for him, it just seemingly every year it's kind of like
Mhm.
how it's been. I don't know. I still stand on the fact that they're so talented at other places that it's probably going to be all right. But
Mhm.
here's a
Well, I'm
scenario.
worried about the Bucks offensive line. Honestly, that's my big
Yeah,
concern because they were able to get it done
yeah.
against the Panthers, who
hmm
have some guys, but the
Parsons is
Cowboys,
different.
I'm more scared of. Micah
Yeah.
Parsons, Demarcus Lawrence. Um,
Can I just bring up a scenario really quickly that it's probably not going to happen, but I just imagining like the media like outcry that would happen if the Eagles don't win the division. They're going to Tampa again on Wild Card Weekend.
mhm.
What if they go to Tampa? It's Hurts' first game back, and he just lays an egg again.
Yeah, that would be pretty nuts,
That would be
honestly.
like, I'm trying not to laugh because I just think it's absurd. Like, it's probably not going to happen, but just I don't know. That would be something. I don't. Yeah, I think he probably. It's actually that would be fascinating either way because even if he goes in there and he plays amazing, it's like, oh, look at this growth of this guy. Like he's changed so much. Like it's not the same Tampa team, but it would be a cool comparison game if we
I
got to
just
like
don't think
watch
there's
him again.
really any chance that he lays an egg. I
No, I
think
don't
I
either.
think it's like to me the way that he has
Just having fun.
progressed and the way he's played all year, it's like
Yeah.
if they lost that game, it would
I
be a
the thing
close one.
that's tough for him is I think if the Eagles don't win a Super Bowl, if they get there, they're probably fine. Like this offseason, like avoiding PR backlash just because they got there and they probably might just play like a better team. But if they don't get to the Super Bowl, it's probably going to come back on him or coaching, one of the two. But I would almost say it's likely going to be him because coaching just hasn't given us any reason for them to think they're going to make a poor decision at this point. But
I mean, it's such speculation at this
yeah,
point, but it's hard to come down too hard on anybody who played that well in the regular season and
but like this happened
unless
with
they
Lamar. Like,
really you really have to fall apart. I think the reason that the Cowboys got the backlash that they have
I mean, do you? Like
is
Lamar threw for 350 and ran for 150 in a playoff game after an MVP season, and people were like, "Oh, he can't win in the playoffs because he lost one playoff game."
I don't think
And
anybody said that he can't win in the playoffs
that was definitely a
immediately. I
thing.
think it took another year of that before that became a
But
narrative.
there was the one loss the year before against the Chargers when he had played like 5 games before, and
Mhm.
that was his second playoff game. And the next year he won a playoff game. That Titans game was like enough. Like people are very reactionary, especially with the quarterback position. And I just for his
I
sake, I hope
I don't know. I mean, here's one of the issues is that like I ignore a lot of that. So maybe
yeah. But this stuff, I feel like it matters because I do think to an extent, media impacts the way we look at these guys. And then I think, it gets into locker rooms. I don't know. With better organizations, I don't think it matters. Like it probably matters less for the Eagles, but I don't think anyone is completely protected from it impacting, the play of teams if there's drama going on outside. It's really hard. I mean, I know Washington's completely different, but it's just I've seen this team crumble because of news stories. It happens. And
Mhm. Well,
you could
it's
argue
the
Carson Wentz.
barrage of questions and it's constant and it's
Yeah.
exhausting, and I get that, but look, I think we've got to see the Eagles actually like really stumble for me
Mhm.
to even like think that's a likelihood
Yeah.
because again, there's no guarantee about getting to the Super Bowl, but we're talking about fans being disappointed in a one and done situation, and pretty much anything can happen then. So I think they're gonna have a really good team coming back. I mean, my concern is if he's healthy
Mhm.
because
Well, that's also the unfair part about all this is that, they haven't really talked about what his injury is, and we don't,
mhm,
and he could be not 100%, and if
mhm.
they lose, they're probably going to say, oh, yeah, he wasn't 100%. And then people are going to be like, well, people are going to ignore that because, it's just the way it is. And then
Whatever. I mean, to be honest, I try and
I know you don't, but I'm saying this is what's going to happen if they lose. And I think it's unfair,
yeah,
but it happens regardless.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, the Bills fans have been pretty good about we're just happy to be here, but after last year, that might be what they look like this year. Like the reaction, like the disappointment, the frustration might start to occur because they have a clear window, and they've had a clear window for about 3 years,
Mhm.
including this year, and they couldn't get it done in the first 2 of those years. Last year kind of being the year where it just felt like everything was ripe for a run, and they lose the heartbreaker game. I think that if they don't at least make it to the playoffs this year, I mean, at least to the Super Bowl this year, I think there is going to be real, genuine disappointment from the fans, and they may start to move on from that "we're just happy to be here" mentality. Because eventually you get jaded. Eventually, you only go to the Super Bowl and be competitive for so many years before you start
Well,
absolutely
eventually,
expecting more.
the expectation is win a Super Bowl, and it's multiple years in a row. And I think that that's kind of the difference between that fan base and like the Eagles and Dallas. Is I think Eagles and Cowboys fans like legitimately expect Super Bowl every year because they just, quite frankly, like these teams are a little bit spoiled. Like they get a lot of the primetime games, they get a lot of the hype up. Like it's kind of the nature of like being one of the better NFC East franchises. Buffalo is just like, if we win one, like it doesn't matter how we got there, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Interesting. Speculating about fan reaction is like, you know what I mean? It's
But it's
sometimes,
it's a business and they are consumers and the consumers affect it,
yes, I agree. I agree. It's just, I would rather just watch it happen and then try and be the voice of reason afterwards
Mhm.
than guess, because it's one of those things where like
Well, I
you're
wish
you're
more
right,
people.
but it's like, if you walk into a job interview with
Yeah.
like some serious swagger, like it could pay off, and the interviewer would love your confidence, or they could just think you're a cocky jerk. And
Yeah.
I think that there's some of that in this. It's like there's such a subtlety with exactly how these play out to what the fan reaction will be, that it could really go either way for most of these. I think Bills would be disappointed. Eagles would be disappointed after the hype job that the media has done for them this year, for sure. But
It's unfair. Like it is, but that's how it, I mean, that's how it is with every team in that division. And I think, I think it probably hurts Dallas and Philly less than like Washington, the Giants, because Washington, the moment they do anything, gets thrown into a Sunday night game that like everyone's expecting them to win, and then they lose, and now it's just like doldrums again.
mhm.
Um, the Eagles have capitalized on this a lot, and if they lose one game, but it's the nature of it. Is it's we how many times have we seen like a 1 seed just lose to a pretty good wild card team in the divisional round? It happens. It's not
Mhm.
because they're bad at football. It's just you don't play your best football game. You play a team who's like, we got nothing to lose, who also is in the playoffs because they have decent football players, and it's just let's flip a coin like and see what happens. And sometimes you're the Niners and you get some snow and you block a punt and you win a football game that you probably had no business winning, but now the Packers have all these questions about their future because of that. And of course, it's happened to them more than once, but this is the league, and I don't think the Eagles are going to have that happen. I think they're one of like the more high floor teams we've seen in a while, but some of these NFC teams are playing pretty well down the stretch. Like I think the Niners are. I would have said maybe a month ago, like, oh, the Eagles, they're rolling through the NFC. Home game against the Niners, like I'm not as certain now that it's like a walkover game for them.
Well, sure. I think if the 49ers win the NFC outright, and in a regular season, and they get a bye, and then they're guaranteed home field advantage throughout, I mean, that's going to
They
be
would be
a
favored. Yeah, I
tough
mean,
out for anybody to go in and try and beat. I mean,
can we talk about them really quick? Because I just spent my New Year's as a Niners fan, and they're all excited about Brock Purdy and like how he's playing. They have such a weird thing going on right now because it's kind of like I hate to compare everything to Washington, but it's like kind of the same thing where it's like I don't think Purdy's a better quarterback than Garoppolo, and I think you can watch the offense, and if you know what you're looking at, like a lot of play action, they're not drop back passing. They've had the lead in most of these games except for this week. It's been kind of easy for them, but they're winning, and they're rolling, so you make a change when, maybe you have the better, and it's turned out for Washington, it wasn't the better quarterback, but maybe the better quarterback is going to be healthy, but you're rolling. Like, do you make the change going to the playoffs?
I don't know. That's tough. I mean, so what's funny is Brock Purdy. I remember watching him in the preseason and being genuinely impressed.
He was always we had him as like a first round discussion guy. Even the year of the Lawrence, there's a video back, Boomer Bust, a while back, if you want to go find it. It was Lawrence, Lance, and Fields. Zach Wilson we didn't know about yet because he was a one-hit wonder. And then Mac Jones, like, we really didn't know about yet either. He was also kind of a one-year guy. And we would all bring up guys that we liked as like the fourth quarterback because we knew about these other three being good. I can't remember the names that were thrown out there. I really can't. Wilson and Jones were not either of them. Man, I really cannot remember for the life of me any of them. But Brock Purdy was one of them. Max actually brought up Brock Purdy because Mike Renner at PFF was a big fan of him and had him as like a late first round guy. And he had a couple injuries and he fell out. And I think even that year, like, this guy declares he's probably like an early day 3 pick still. And then he came back another year and was worse even then. So I think he had opportunities to be a high pick if he had played better. He just kind of played his best ball at the beginning of college and then faded.
Look, I think when you watch him, you can see that there's in terms of top end physical traits, not even elite, just like NFL physical traits, he's not quite where you want him to be. And I think that's always a huge consideration because that dictates how much of the field is available to you in passing concepts. And that's something that rules the league right now. And anytime you don't have the full array of locations, then you have to start to run what are considered like slightly more gimmicky offenses. Like it's when a lot of play action has to happen. It's when you have to throw underneath a lot more. And I think Garoppolo is like, he might be the benchmark for the guy who's like just barely there in terms of physical gifts, that he can hit every part of the field. Now, he doesn't like to throw deep, but physically he at least can do it. I don't think Brock Purdy's quite there, but I think he plays so well within the structure of the offense that as long as he has a good team and a well-schemed team, he's always going to look like this. So the question is, right now, is that enough for you? Do you not want to upset the apple cart if you have a well-schemed, very well-rounded, highly talented offensive roster? I don't know. I mean, I really like him. I think at the bare minimum, he's going to be like a 12-year-long back.
Another Garoppolo. That's what I think he is. I think he's got a little more mobility than Garoppolo, and I think maybe his arm's not as strong, but that's what he's going to be.
I think that's
a West Coast QB who operates your offense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's Kyle Shanahan. It's crazy to me that Niners fans don't want to wear this banner because the players are awesome. I think Christian McCaffrey's great. George Kittle's great. Debo's great. They have Nick Bosa's awesome. Like, they have all this talent, but to some extent, like, you could really sit back and look at this roster.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more like the Packers in recent years than you would think, where it's like they have high-end players, like some key positions, but their depth isn't amazing. That O-line is like, it's Trent Williams and then a couple other guys who are like whatever. They are so well. Like, this Kyle Shanahan might be there for 40 more years. He de-emphasizes the position that matters most, and no one else can do that. He's the only guy who's figured it out. And it's like a superpower that no one else in the league has. And they're just going to always be good because of it. Because even if your quarterback gets hurt, any other team in the league, your quarterback gets hurt and you're what do you do? Like, you're not going to win a Super Bowl now. If the Eagles have Gardner Minshew, like, this is the best team in football probably on paper. Gardner Minshew's their starter. They might have a shot, but they're not the favorites anymore. But the Niners go from a guy who's been their veteran and played in a Super Bowl to Mr. Irrelevant, who probably didn't deserve to be that, but like, he's Mr. Irrelevant. And it's like there's no drop off. And they're the only team in the NFL that can do that. And I don't know. If I was a Niners fan, I'd just be like, we have a genius head coach. Like this guy is brilliant. As much as Mike McDaniel gets praised for what he's doing in Miami, like no one else can do what they're doing. They're the only team.
Well, I think that Kyle Shanahan is so special in so many ways. I think schematically what he does is extremely impressive. I think what he does in terms of getting his players prepared is extremely impressive. But you know what's maybe the most impressive and one of the most important things to long-term success, which is something that we're seeing a little bit in New England right now? Identifying and grooming coaches. It's like who is cycling through San Francisco both offensively and defensively from their coaching staff is extremely impressive. And it's like you meet a lot of these guys, as you go around the league. I know from the Houston days and from the Washington days, he got to know a lot of these guys. But it's like, I mean, his ability to identify them and then and put them in positions to succeed like year after year after year, it's I think that might be like his greatest gift to like a very extended run of high quality football. But
yeah, I mean, and last year my top coaching candidate was Mike McDaniel. This year it's going to be probably D'Amico Ryans. Like there's a passion that these guys coach with too under him that's just different. And they really have built something that is probably more sustainable than it's given credit. Because last year they started 3-6. People were like, "Is Kyle Shanahan the right guy for this job?" And us talking heads who know what we're talking about are like, "Come on!" Like they just have had a ton of injuries, but. Yeah, I still think he doesn't get enough credit for where they are. By the way, just looking at some of these names, I pulled up a video that we had for QB4. So there was the Georgia QB battle, Jamie Newman and JT Daniels. Newman was a UDFA. Daniels is now on his fourth college team. Brock Purdy. KJ Costello. There's a name that, draft nerds will remember. Tanner Morgan, who's also still in college in Minnesota. Kyle Trask, who was actually the guy, or I guess probably at that time, Kellen Mond, who also got drafted, and Sam Ehlinger, who also got drafted, but was not.
Well, right now, Brock Purdy looks like the best of any of those guys.
Yes, he definitely does. I mean, am I holding out for any of these guys? No, not really. No, yeah, it's him. It's absolutely him at this point. I think Trask, I haven't heard great things about him right now in Tampa, but I thought he was going to have a shot at some point. But
yeah, it's weird. I mean, I don't think that this is a league for statuesque players anymore. I mean, that's probably, I think realistically,
you have to be Brady and this isn't true about him either, but Burrow, you just have to, it's got to be processing and accuracy.
Statuesque at
but
all.
I mean, the way he plays, I don't think he needs mobility to play the way he plays. It's just an extra thing to his game.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I would say that's fair. I need to watch Trevor Lawrence a little bit more throughout this hot streak to really get a good feel for him.
I think his mobility matters a little more than a guy like Burrow even, but his processing is good too. But, I think we get these big guys in college with strong arms, and there's still people who are like, oh, big and strong. That's good. You have to be accurate. You have to process well if you're going to stand in the pocket. If you're not making correct decisions and delivering, you have to be a West Coast QB if you're a pocket guy these days. That's kind of the deal. And if you can throw it downfield, great. But
I think it's tough because even a guy like Joe Burrow wasn't immedately that. He still used his mobility, especially early on.
It's shaped
in the first year and a half. Even this year, he was trying to extend plays too long. You know what I mean? It's he's proven he can. About 2.5 years in, operate exclusively out of the pocket with quick reads and reaction. He was still kind of relying on second reaction stuff for a while. And so I think it's tough to come into the NFL and not have that at all and just be expected to dissect offenses immediately. I think it's even one of the reasons that Brock Purdy is playing as well as he is, because he might not have that big arm throw far, but he has the athleticism and the mobility and the full body athleticism to make those out of structure, like weird platform throws. And no, he's not doing it like Mahomes, but he's getting the ball there. You know what I mean? And like that's something also that we see with Mike White, where it's like he can sit back in the pocket and carve you up, you know, if he has at least a little bit of protection and is healthy, but he cannot do anything out of structure. It's like asking him to roll out in structure is, you know, you're not going to get a monster throw from him ever. But if he's running in a way where it's like the mechanics aren't built into it, it's just not happening. He just can't get the ball there. It's the full body athleticism, you know.
The model for young Ben Roethlisberger is dead. I think some people still look like there's a kid at Boston College named Phil Jurkovich, and he's, you know, he's a decent college quarterback. I never thought he was an NFL guy.
But even Ben was like,
well, that's what I'm saying.
Weirdly athletic too.
He was weirdly athletic, but the game changed over time, and I think we kind of think, oh, he got old, so he wasn't anymore. I think he kind of got phased out athletically even before that. He became a pocket guy because that's where the game moved. Early in his career when he was able to move around, which was like 2007, like, yeah, awesome. But I just don't think you're going to see, you know, like Josh Allen is that guy now. And he is so like, there's a clear difference between Josh Allen now and Ben Roethlisberger then in terms of athleticism, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I don't think you're the only one with that opinion.
I mean, okay, yeah. But like, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's probably a 70-year-old GM out there who disagrees, but you know, those are the guys who are calling the shots. So,
well, I mean, look, Ben Roethlisberger had, like, okay, so one of the subtle things to athleticism is like it doesn't mean the same thing for everybody. You know, and it's like if you can move like with a subtle quickness to you, but you still have like balance and torque with your movements, that is a special type or certain type of athleticism. That's what Ben Roethlisberger had. Like he had a powerful base and he could move in any direction, maintain his balance, and like still have like full range of athletic movement, kind of no matter which way he was moving. Josh Allen is different. I mean, Josh Allen can kind of do that a little bit, but Josh Allen is like, he has like big strides. He's like he can run, like really run. You know what I mean? Even laterally, he can really run. I don't think.
But it's just like that to me is kind of baseline, not baseline, but just we see a lot of that now. And
prototypical, you mean?
Ben Roethlisberger was thought of as like a more mobile guy than the average quarterback back in 2008. And go watch him moving around. Like, yeah, he's making guys miss, but it's just not. Like,
he's not making guys miss. He is shrugging guys off. That's what he's doing.
Well, that's, you know, it's kind of you know, there's some of that to that as well. I mean, it's, you know, you shrug guys off by getting them off balance. You know, if they get a nice hit, if they get a clean hit on you, it's hard to shrug guys off. So, but it's just that we're at a point where the baseline of mobility is you are expected to be able to pick up 10 yards.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's pretty important now. I mean, let's look at any of these guys. I mean, as we just roll through the playoff spots, Mahomes can do it, Allen can do it, Burrow can do it, Herbert can do it, Lamar can do it, Lawrence can do it. And then I mean, Mac, I don't know about 10 yards, but like he is probably athletic enough to like get close.
Like
maybe 7-8 type.
It's thing. Like if he's not able to, it's like, but like that's your pocket. That's what you need to be pocket passer, like super accurate and makes good decisions. And I think their offense has been a disaster this year, and that's part of their issues. But even if you say they don't make it, I mean, look who's in. I mean,
Tua can do it.
Pickett can do it.
Pickett can do it.
You know,
Tannehill could do it. And on the other side, Hurts could do it. Purdy can do it. They went after Lance specifically because I'm not sure Garoppolo really could do it.
I'm sure he can.
Cousins could do it.
Yeah.
Brady can't.
Well, he's closer to Mac than these other guys, but Brady can do it because Brady's just like an awareness thing. Like he just sees things before they happen.
He just tucks the ball and runs.
Yeah.
Just long, slow ass strides. But yeah. Dak can
Daniel
do it.
Jones,
Daniel
Geno can
Jones
do
can
it.
do it. Gino looked pretty athletic,
Geno,
man.
Geno's like Stroud is gonna, I think, get some comps to him just because he's gonna he can run if he wants to. He just
I
doesn't,
think that's really a really fair comp, actually. I think that's a really fair comp. Goff,
Probably not, but
Rodgers can still do it.
Rodgers can still do it.
I mean, almost all of these guys can do it.
Carson Wentz can do it, but he'd fumble.
Yeah, Carson. Oh man,
I think he could do it. That was probably a big part of the reason. Well, ugh, I don't even want to. Let's move on.
Truly, let's. All right, let's talk about the Seahawks for a sec.
Yeah, okay.
We're kind of bouncing around, but it's fine. The Seahawks. So the Seahawks now control their own destiny, and I think people didn't necessarily expect them.
Green Bay does. If they win and Green Bay wins, the Packers get in.
If Green Bay beats the Packers,
so if Green Bay controls their own destiny, the Seahawks need a win and the Lions to win. Because if right now they're all tied, so it's conference. It's the Lions Packers tiebreaker gets applied first, and the Lions beat Green Bay, so they're out. And then the tiebreaker right now is Lions Seahawks. Seahawks beat the Lions. The moment Green Bay wins and the Lions are out of that tiebreaker, and it's just them in Seattle, it's conference tiebreaker, and the Packers win the tiebreaker.
Okay. All right. Well, that sucks for Seattle then, because they will probably beat the Rams next week, honestly. Yeah. So that'll be disappointing to go 9-8 and win out, but
yeah.
Anyway,
they had their opportunities. They played the Raiders, and they probably should have won that game, and they lost to the Panthers at home.
Well, here's the thing about the Seahawks. The Seahawks, I don't think, would make enough noise against a true playoff team anyway. So I think, I think they'd be a one and done team because Geno is playing well right now, but they got a pass rush on the Jets that I just don't think would be functional against any of these other teams that have a little bit better of an offensive line and a more mobile quarterback than Mike White. He might be up there for one of the most immobile quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Mm-hmm. And so, they were getting some pressure with 4. They blitzed a lot in that game. They brought 5 a ton in that game.
They always do. My thing with them as a pass rush unit is they don't have any names really, other than Poona Ford's a good player. They play 6 defensive tackles pretty evenly and 4 edge players pretty evenly. And they run 4-eye, 1 tech, 4-eye, and it's a 3-4. And they trust their outside linebackers to cover because they're kind of closer to linebackers than edge rushers. Wosu is kind of a hybrid type. It's just, I think they give some teams problems because it's just a very different look than any other defense in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, but I think that they'll be vulnerable. I mean, I think they'll be vulnerable once they face off against some of these better teams. I mean, I think there was a certain ineptitude with what the Jets were doing offensively yesterday that they're just not going to see once they pass the Rams. I don't even know if they'll see it with the Rams, honestly. So I didn't really believe in them long term throughout the playoffs. So maybe it's not just all I'm saying is maybe not the biggest deal if they do get knocked out, even if they win a couple of these late games, because I think they're in a great situation. They need to make some additions. I think, if they could get Will Anderson, if they manage to get him with that 3rd overall pick, that would be best possible case scenario. And there are some other players that they can add, and they can do a little in free agency if they want to bring Geno back. I think that's probably the way to go. I'm pretty confident in that, to be honest. But that's the place where they need help. They need guys that can win one-on-one matchups. They need to not have to blitz all the time to get a pass rush. They need edge pressure. So something they've been lacking for a while since Carlos Dunlap had a run there for a hot minute.
Yeah, I mean, They've drafted so many guys. It's like the one that's interesting is Mafe, who had a good start to the year, and he's just kind of, I don't know if he's like dropped off or got hurt or something. I was tracking some of their games earlier on, so I knew a lot more about who was playing for them. But they are relying on like Woolen and some of these real like good players in their defense to make plays, and yardage wise they've struggled, and just we saw them play the Niners. I don't know if I want to see that again.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not trying to throw shade at them in any way. I just think they're probably one solid offseason away, which fortunately for them will include a very high draft pick from being real competitors down the line. I think, there's a testament to their coaching and player development that's happened this year, and they've got good players, but I think if they win and they get in and they make some noise, like, cool. But I don't see them as a Super Bowl contender. I mean, but what about the Lions and Packers then?
So I think that's kind of it's we could have a whole discussion about the league scheduling things, but I think that they kind of messed up putting the games they did on Saturday. But this is going to be the Sunday night game, Scoop, by the way. And there's a chance the Lions aren't playing for anything, which is kind of gross, but I kind of hope they are. I don't really want to root against Seattle, but if Seattle loses, this becomes a de facto playoff game, and it would be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm favoring Green Bay here, but I think both of these teams are legitimately deserving. Both these teams, the NFC North has two teams with positive point differential, and the Vikings are not it. It's these two teams. Lions have shown their ability to be explosive on offense in more ways than one. I think Ben Johnson is another guy who I'm just like very excited to see if he gets a head coaching job, because he's done some brilliant stuff, very creative stuff for them. They have pieces left and right on that offense, and defensively, some of these younger guys, they're starting to make enough plays, kind of like Seattle, but maybe with a higher ceiling, in that they can find ways to stay in games. And just Green Bay, it's kind of, they're doing the same things they've always done to win, but it's taken a little while for them to figure it fully out, because they had personnel changes. The defense, they added a bunch of young players, new receivers, and they're not really winning in a way that I would consider a way that you would like beat the best teams in the NFL with. Detroit might have more of a puncher's chance against like the Eagles and 49ers of the world than Green Bay, but also Green Bay has Aaron Rodgers, and it just feels like, if they somehow find the high level play from him with the receivers they have, like they could maybe make some noise. But either way, I think this is like, these two teams are the teams that I kind of want to see one of them make the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, I think everybody wants to see the Lions make it because of the storyline. I think if you want to watch the best overall football, probably the Packers are the team that you would hope make it. I mean, the Packers defense is rounded into shape in a way that I don't think you usually see a swing that hard from being that bad to that good. I mean, we've seen the Lions elevate from horrendous to, sustainable, even might be like a bit of a generous word, but like the Packers defense has actually taken the full swing from just outright bad to outright very good. I mean, when you look at the talent that they have, maybe it's not surprising then, but it's like, what happened to make them play that much more effectively? I mean, Jair Alexander, he's been playing well all year, so it's not just him. It's not like he is the difference. I mean, I know that they've moved Rasul Douglas more outside. He was really good for them in the slot last year, and I guess moving him out has helped a little bit, but Devondre Campbell being healthier it has helped. But what is the fundamental difference here? What has helped them actually become a defense that's living up to the talent that it has?
Well, I don't know that Devontae Wyatt's been excellent this year, but I think he's played better as the year's gone on, especially against the run. I think Quay Walker's development has been huge. He's really started to come into form these past, month of games. He's really been something else for them all over the field. Maybe better run defender and pass rusher still than coverage player, but just, doing the base level linebacker play of just he's disciplined. He does his job, and it works for them. When Campbell's also, a really good player and just has been a wild free agent signing for them because he just, was a journeyman who lands in a good spot, and they turn him into this pretty much all pro linebacker. So I think that's been a big thing for them. It's really been the rookies though. I think, Walker, Wyatt, Keyshawn Nixon, I think it cannot be understated like how good of a kick returner he's been for them over the past month and a half. This has been a horrific special teams unit, even with the hire of Bisaccia, who was supposed to fix everything. They kind of started out rough, and then Nixon starts returning kicks for them, and it's really given them a boost offensively because it's not like they really threw the ball all over the place this week. They just had a lot of short fields and had a kickoff return for a touchdown, and they get a pick six, and it really puts the game away pretty early on. But the O-line's beat up still. It's playing well, but it's beat up. They have these receivers that are prone to mistakes, but they make good play calls in key situations. They make big plays on special teams and defense. They're kind of winning the way that Washington was winning midseason, except for their floor is higher because their quarterback's Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, obviously, you can point to the development of the rookie receivers offensively. That is a very obvious improvement. I think our offensive line's a bit healthier now too, which helped. They were pretty banged up in the early part of the year. Aaron Rodgers was banged up in the early part of the year too. But I think like when you have Aaron Rodgers, like there's always this modicum of trust that it's gonna come together at least a little bit. We've never seen him be bad an entire season, or have a bad offense the entire season. But the defense turning around is, I think, probably the biggest surprise for the team. I think we've got to talk about this AFC picture a little bit. I mean, we talked about the NFC a lot.
Yeah.
The Chiefs have taken first place at least temporarily until the Bills play the Bengals tonight. But I mean, the Chiefs are the Chiefs. They have to play who in week 18?
Go to the Raiders.
Raiders, yeah, exactly. So it's like I don't think that we have anything to be concerned about. We can pencil them in for 14-3. But I mean, unless you have something that you want to talk about with the Chiefs, I think we know who they are. I think they've as long as Kelsey's healthy, as long as Mahomes is healthy, as long as their offensive line is pretty much healthy, they're going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. They're going to be extremely difficult to stop. They're going to have opportunistic defense. If they go up against the best quarterbacks and the best offenses, is it a potential weakness? I guess, but we've seen Mahomes overcome that countless times. So I think the real pair of teams to highlight right here would be the Bills and the Bengals, especially because they play against each other tonight. If the Bengals win, they will overtake the Bills for second place and drop the Bills all the way down to third. If the Bills win, Bengals stay where they are, but Bills jump back into first place and maintain that first round bye. This is
force an NFC North championship game next week as well.
Force NFC North championship. AFC North. Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's correct. So if the Bengals lose, then the Ravens still have a shot. If the Bengals win, they clinch that division outright.
A lot riding for them tonight as well as the Bills.
Mm-hmm. So this is a big game. What are your thoughts on these two teams? I mean, you can talk about the game coming up if you want to, or you can just talk about where they are and what you think that they can get done. I mean, to me, any one of these top three AFC teams they're all kind of in the same place. I trust all the quarterbacks immensely. They all have talented, skilled players. I think the Bills have the best defense, but they're all good enough defenses. They're not like glaring holes. They all have enough of a pass rush. If I were to pick which one I think is the best, I'd pick the Bills, but I don't think it's enough of a difference that
it's certain.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've had them number one power rankings the past 2 weeks. The people have had it number one, not me. If you see that Twitter, if I do every week. The Bills, This is where the NFL is tough because I think they are the best team in the NFL and they should be deserving of being home field advantage throughout the rest. I think they're going to lose tonight. Like it's so hard to play in Cincy
It's just
right
a
now.
gut feeling thing.
No, but I think the Bengals have maybe the best home field advantage in football right now. They are rolling at home. They haven't lost a single game. And I just think they've quietly played really good football over the last month. And it's just, I don't know. It's a tough spot. It's not that I think the Bills are the worst team. I just think they're going they're running into a Mack truck right now in Cincinnati. And it's just, if this game were in Buffalo, like I'd pick the Bills. And I think these games are so close on the margins. It's just, I do think the home team kind of has an advantage. And I would expect that, even if the Bills get up early, any response from Cincy and they can ride off the momentum that has been that stadium all year. I could be wrong. They could just fall flat. I mean, these things are not consistent, but that is my gut feeling. I think it's going to be difficult for them. And I think they might lose out on even being a 2 seed here because of this game tonight. But, if they win, they'll get the 1. They're probably going to beat New England next week, I'd expect. But yeah, these things are so temperamental because I really I think if they win tonight, I really feel comfortable about them winning the AFC. And if they don't, then I think it becomes a lot more blurry because the Chiefs are the top seed. And I think they probably become the favorites, but I don't like the Chiefs matching up with Cincy at this point either. And it's just, there's a lot going on.
Well, I think the home field advantage is a big deal because, Buffalo is a very hard place to play in January.
Yeah.
Kansas City is a very hard place to play in January.
They all are. Yeah.
Apparently, Cincinnati is a tough place to play late in the season,
I
too.
will say the Bengals went 8-0 in 2014 or whatever and hosted a wild card game with Danny Dalton and got blown out. So it's, these things are not completely predictive.
I'm not sure how much of a home field advantage it really is. I think it's really just.
I think it's pretty good. I think they're underrated. I don't know if it's on the level of Buffalo and Kansas City, but I think
it's not like I've ever been there, so who am I to talk? But yeah, I think whoever wins it, it's not just that you have to go there. It's that you can't force them to come to you. You know what I mean? So for the Bengals, it's not just that it's in Cincinnati. It's that you don't have to go to Buffalo. Yep. You don't have to go to Kansas City and play those games. And the Chargers, sure. Justin Herbert's big and strong and all that, but he's played the majority of his games in Los Angeles or on the West Coast, and asking him to come play a game in the conference championship in Buffalo, that's kind of a different story. So I think it's going to be a big deal whoever wins this, not just for the bye, but that home field advantage is interesting. When you look down this line of teams that are likely in the playoffs, I think there's an arguable case to be made that the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL right now are all in the AFC and are all in the AFC playoffs.
I think it can make an argument it's a 6.
Are you saying Lamar is better than Aaron Rodgers?
Well, that's tough right now because we don't even know if Lamar's playing. But yeah, that's where I was going with it. We don't know what Lamar we're getting. But yeah, I think you can make an argument just because Rodgers, kind of like Brady, has played like a weaker season, but he's been good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I don't think – I think –
you can make an argument.
You could make an argument. Yeah, it's a different style. I always struggle to decide how and where I want to rank mobile quarterbacks, and not just mobile, but running quarterbacks in terms of directly stacking up against the other guys.
That's why they split them in high school rankings.
Yeah.
No, but I think I would even say if we're saying the top 5 quarterbacks, I don't even know if it's much of an art. I think you're probably just right. It is the 5 best quarterbacks are in this conference.
That's so hard to be anybody other than one of those teams.
Who's the best quarterback in the NFC right now? Are we saying it's Jalen Hurts? Is it still Brady? Is it would probably Rodgers, right? I don't know that I'm taking Rodgers over Herbert right now for sure. Not the 3 at the top. So it's like Lawrence. You have to make an argument that Rodgers is better than Lawrence right now. And I just think objectively that Lawrence has been, maybe you can make an argument better than one of these top 3 over the past month and a half. He's been unbelievable. So I really believe we talked about this a little bit before. I think Jacksonville is getting less of a chance to win some playoff games here than they should be. I think they really have an opportunity here.
Yeah, no, I think they do too, and just based on the quarterback play alone. But the question I have with them is just, you get to the big moment. I don't
Yeah.
think their offensive line is as strong. I don't think their defense is as
But
good.
it's played well because Lawrence is playing better, and that helps the O-line.
Yeah, for sure. But it's also like the Bills' offensive line is
Yeah.
kind of there right now, and the Bengals' offensive line's kind of there right now. But I think they're even still slightly a bit better, and they have better defenses to fall back on. They have better
Receivers.
skill players. I
Yeah.
mean, who's the best skill player for Jacksonville right now?
It's probably Zay Jones.
It's probably Travis Etienne,
Or,
and then Zay
yeah,
Jones after that. But I mean, like you look at the Chiefs. I mean, Travis Kelce is much better than anybody that they
would
have.
take any of the players, anybody who plays for like Sky Moore. The Jaguars would like kill to have Sky Moore. I feel like even.
I mean, the Bills. You got Stephon Diggs. You got
Khalil Shakir is there
Khalil
like four.
Shakir.
Like, I think they would take Khalil Shakir easily at Jacksonville. Yeah,
and even their other outside starter, his name's escaping me right now.
Gabe Davis.
Gabe Davis. I mean,
Yeah.
the Bengals, obviously, they have like 4 guys that would probably any one of them would be a starter for the Bengals. I mean, for the Jaguars, even the Chargers. Now that Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are back, Austin Eckler is probably better than any of their skill players. Maybe not ETN, but like close enough. It's like they just. I get it. Trevor Lawrence is playing awesome, but when you look at just the overall talent level of the rest of the roster, one game maybe, but it's like I would still pick against them with pretty much all of these teams outside of.
I do think defensively they have some guys who are playmakers that are younger, probably play with like kind of the youth naivety. Yeah, whatever. I don't know how you say that word, but they're not. They aren't worried about messing up because it's early in their careers, and it's like they don't really they lack fear. So like Andre Sisco's made a bunch of big plays this year. Tyson Campbell's been a pick machine.
Sure.
I think Trevon Walker and Josh Allen are pressure as much as you like them to, but when they get sacks, it's like they're getting strip sacks. They're forcing fumbles here and there. They have some linebackers, I believe, that they drafted this year that are decent. Foya Luakon has played better as the year's gone on. I still don't think he should have been paid what he was, but Rayshawn Jenkins has made some big plays for them in key moments this year.
I'm not trying to say that they're bad. I'm not.
Yeah, no, but like I just think Kansas City has kind of gotten by on like forcing field goals in the red zone under Spagnuolo, and I don't think.
Yeah, but they still have Chris Jones. You know what I mean? Their linebackers are outright good. I mean, Nick Bolton and Willie Gay are like, maybe not the best in the NFL, but they're outright good. L'Jarius Sneed, I think he's an underrated corner. I mean, I'm not saying that. I think
the Lawrence we saw against Dallas is good enough to overcome pretty much anything except for an Allen or a Mahomes or a Burrow or a Herbert, just like matching him in terms of playing that well. If you get that Lawrence in Kansas City and Mahomes has a lower variance game, they could beat the Chiefs. It's just that's the way it is. I mean, he played nearly perfect, and again, he had some turnovers, but like he did the thing where like 40 seconds, no timeouts. We need to get into field goal range. You have to be perfect. Get us there, and he did it. To me, that's like the sign today of like everything's on your shoulders and you made it work. And when your quarterback is capable of that, your roster could be relatively barren and you can win almost any football game.
I think in the regular season, yeah. I think in the playoffs, it's tough. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. I think I mean, if for whatever reason they end up being matched up against the Ravens without Lamar, I'm quite confident.
I will say, but those 5 teams, the one thing is their coaching. It's not on the Chiefs or Bills level, but I think it's better than the Bengals, and I think it's better than the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, I will roll with that as well. I think that does make a difference. All right, Patriots. So they have slotted themselves into the playoffs here, but they are I mean, they're in. They're in for now. The Steelers are 8-8. The Dolphins are 8-8. The Steelers would have to beat the Browns, and the Dolphins would have to beat the Jets, and the Patriots would have to lose to the Bills, which I think we all more or less expect at this point. So, which of these teams, I guess, that are 8-9, do you think are the most likely to climb back into the playoffs?
I don't see this. This is so they scheduled the Kansas City game on a Saturday, and it's I think really stupid the NFL did it because let's say the Bills lose tonight and Kansas City wins that Saturday game. Kansas City locks up the number 1 seed. The Bills, I mean, I guess they could play for the number 2 seed if Cincy somehow loses to the Ravens, but there's a chance they rest their starters and New England just gets in, which I think is gross. And because the Patriots are.
Full disclosure, there are not enough players on a football team to rest
everybody
your starters, and the Bills could absolutely still
beat the Patriots. But it does. It's going to help New England if it happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like I think the Bills should just knock the Pats out because I don't want to see the Patriots in the playoffs. The offense is the same problems with the Buccaneers are having right now, like they have with their offense, where it's just like this is 2002. We're running Ohio and hoping to get separation, and it's just you don't have the receivers for it. Your O-line is decent, but you're not going to run the ball so well that you're going to beat any of these teams. And then the defense does some awesome things. I called out Kyle Duggar as an all-pro a couple weeks ago, and no one was talking about it. And he has 2 pick sixes in 3 weeks, and now he's everyone's talking about it. That guy's great. Awesome. And they just they play him as a robber, and he's just been awesome. He's one of those few box safety build guys who actually plays like full safety in today's nickel NFL. But they're fun, but they're fun when they're playing to get into the playoffs and not once they actually get in. I
just don't feel like they deserve it.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be right. Like all these teams that have endured some of this difficulty. I mean, the Dolphins with Tua consistently getting knocked out of the game. They've had Teddy Bridgewater come in twice as a starter in place of Tua and get knocked out of the game both times.
Yeah,
and for them, I mean, for the Jets to not make it, but the Patriots to make it. I mean, just in the AFC alone, there's teams that just genuinely deserve to be in more. But and I know it doesn't work that way, but that's just why I don't want to see the Patriots get in. With what they've done offensively, coaching wise, is bad. And this is one of the points I wanted to make. Full circle from the Kyle Shanahan conversation. As great of a coach as Bill Belichick has been, that has not been something that he's had. He doesn't have that line of coaches that for some reason people are consistently high on these guys that come through his program and go other places, but they haven't worked out. They haven't ever been good. I mean, I think you can look immediately at the guys who have come from the Shanahan coaching tree, and there's already a bunch of them who have proven themselves as successful NFL coaches. Maybe they won't all have multi-decade tenures, but they've been outright good. There has not been but one guy who's been pretty decent, and he doesn't even have a job anymore.
Yeah.
So his ability to recognize and develop coaches, it just doesn't even seem to exist. I'm not even sure how much of a role these guys have within it. He seemed to be so confident in his own ability to just get by with whoever that he literally had Joe Judge and Matt Patricia operate an offense, which I'm not sure they've ever done. Definitely not at an NFL level.
Two guys who kind of got clowned out of their jobs too for being kind of disasters as head coaches. Without really getting into it, I think there's some key cultural differences between the way Shanahan and Belichick operate that clearly make a difference. And I think it's kind of the way the game is moving. I think I don't want to be like, oh, the NFL was problematic, but like it kind of like some of the like locker room cultures from the 90s and 80s that is kind of followed Belichick. It's not great. It's very militaristic, and I think it kind of there's a little bit of a my way or the highway type thing, and so you get all these coaches who try to be Bill Belichick because they're like brought up to respect him so much that the only thing that they can do is when they get another job is I have to do it exactly the way he taught me because that's what I'm used to, you know.
I
Whereas,
also get the feeling that it's like I get the feeling that he doesn't teach his coaches. I
well,
think
yeah,
he just does and they
yeah,
just follow. Like
yeah,
that's again not being in the building, but I don't get the feeling that Belichick is like sitting down in like meetings with coaches individually and like,
mhm.
you know, I don't
He's
know how
not
much
a
feedback he's giving them. I have the feeling like he just operates. He sets a tone and a standard, and he operates, and everybody else just follows
he's
suit.
not a guy that you look at it, you're like that guy loves to foster relationships,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, look at what happened with him and Brady and him were together for 20 years, and
and
we're
Brady was
still not
like
certain.
happy to move
Yeah,
on.
yeah, like, and they won a lot, and it still didn't matter.
Uh,
So, you know, be nice. That's just kind of. I mean, I'm not like I don't want to say like he's the worst person in the world. He's not. Like clearly, like Belichick, like people work with him and they're able to make it work. But it's just there's definitely a difference between Shanahan has been able to kind of create passionate coordinators who operate kind of on their own level and feel comfortable doing so. And then when they go get their own head coaching jobs, like they have their own different ways of developing a roster. It's not like, you know, Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur are similar, but it's easier to point out differences between what they do and what Kyle Shanahan does than any of these other guys who have come from the Patriot system. They all just try to do the same
hmm
stuff when they arrive at Detroit or Houston or wherever they go.
hmm Yeah, well, I mean, you can just see it even in the personalities. Like
Mhm.
it's so clear. I mean, McDaniel is so different than Kyle Shanahan. Like I think Shanahan has this very dry, very subdued humor. Like his tone is very like very steady.
And I'll
I don't think
say,
McDaniel's that way at all.
yeah,
Robert
no,
Saleh is not that
very
way at
different.
all. I mean, even McVay. I mean, these guys aren't like Kyle Shanahan tree guys per se, but you know, they were with him in Washington before they ended up moving on, and it's like each one of them has a clear and distinct personality. I mean,
Mhm.
McVay is like very bright and loud and like
Cheerful, like everyone
yeah,
loves being around him.
and
Like, and
and
I'll say,
Lafleur is like I mean, he's probably closer to Shanahan,
mhm.
honestly, but anyway, it
I
doesn't. I don't think it's intentional. I think.
one of my favorite Washington podcasts is Craig Hoffman and Logan Paulson, who's ex tight end for Washington.
Hmm
Paulson played. He followed Shanahan a lot around. He went to Atlanta and it was like always one of Shanahan's favorite blocking tight ends to just pick up for cheap in free agency. And just talking to Shanahan, he said something like Shanahan really knows that he's not like a McVay or a McDaniel in terms of his personality. But Shanahan understands that when he's working with these people, that he really had to work on that and like get to a point where he was somebody that people wanted to work with. He worked on fostering those relationships and becoming the type of person that like people look up to. I'm not certain that that has ever been a thing that's preached in New England, um, where it's like legitimately like part of being on that team and working with people is like I need to work on talking to people and like being just like not kind of a robot. It's just
hmm
I think that the process of winning there has gotten so almost binary that it's just there's nothing extra that they expect, and it's kind of it's why the teams are dull. Like they lack personality because they wear that as a badge of honor. But at some point, people figure out how to make it work with that, and it's just I think they've been passed up. Like I really, I think Belichick does great things defensively still, but it's the lack of evolution there has been a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I genuinely do. But from as far as what I expect them to do in the playoffs, if they get in, I think they again they were to play anybody other, and this is probably not even going to happen, but if they were to play anybody other than a Lamarless Baltimore Ravens, I think they've got no shot.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So I don't want to see that. So what about the Dolphins?
So
let's just assume that for whatever reason the Bills still beat the Patriots, right? Maybe they won't. Maybe the Patriots get in, whatever. But let's say they do. Which of these teams do you think is the most realistic chance of getting in? I mean, the Jets didn't look good. I know they're not going to want to get, basically lose 6 games straight to close out the season, especially against a division rival. So they will fight against the Dolphins. The Steelers, they are rounding into shape, but the Browns are probably relatively on par with them talent-wise, if not slightly better. So which of these two teams do you think actually has the best chance to win and overtake the Patriots to become a playoff team?
So Nico's saying that the Dolphins might be running Skylar Thompson again.
They would have to.
Yeah.
Because I think Bridgewater has the hand injury.
So Tua's definitely not coming back. Is Tua available for the playoffs? Like, I don't know.
I don't know if Tua's definitely not coming back.
Don't even
but
know.
I mean, I think you look
because they are the team that deserves it, but I don't think they're gonna get in because I just think they are relying on that quarterback position to an extent. It's I think it's Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh's gonna sneak in. That's where I'm at.
That's so funny. He's genuinely.
I think Mike Tomlin's awesome, and Max is like not a Kenny Pickett guy, and I'm just like I'm thinking this. I haven't actually said it to him, but he's gonna hear it if he hears it here for the first time. I think he's being spoiled. Like Kenny Pickett as a rookie quarterback is like I would trade for him in an instant. This guy is just gutty, He's
better than any of the rookie quarterbacks last year.
Yeah, they picked the right guy. They did. They absolutely.
He's older, which helps, but it's like.
And I think he's something to build. This is not the most talented roster in the NFL, and they're winning games. And they beat. I know it's Tyler Huntley, but like the Ravens are like still not pushovers. They beat a good team the other day. I think they're going to sneak in, and I don't think they're really going to give anyone a game, but it's fun. Like I think it's kind of cool to see the rookie quarterback make the playoffs.
I'm not that I'm like a huge fan of the Steelers in the same way that the Patriots have just owned the AFC for too many years. I would rather see the Steelers get in any day over the Patriots. So look, I think I'm just hopeful that the Bills beat up on the Patriots. Honestly, the Patriots barely beat the Dolphins this week, even with Skylar Thompson in there. You know what I mean? Like I have no faith in them right now. I think the Bills can beat the Patriots. I really do. The Dolphins, if it is Skylar Thompson going up against the Jets, they still have pride. They are going to make his life miserable. They beat Skylar Thompson like 40-17 last time they played him. I don't really expect it to go any differently this time. Jets defense is still healthy. So that really leaves it to the Steelers. Like if the Steelers win, then they're in. And if they don't, then the Patriots go in even with their loss. So I don't know. I mean, I have faith in Tomlin too. I think it's funny how down people have been on him. I think we need to see what the new management looks like there because they are also a team that's been a little bit lost in history, lost in the Stone Age in terms of team building. I think they still scout fairly well, but I think some of their approaches to how they do things could really be updated. Regardless, they just need work on the offensive line. They've got to draft a freaking offensive tackle in this draft coming up. They have to. They cannot put Dan Moore out there again. Like they cannot roll with this offensive line.
Chukwuma Okorafor.
Yeah. Like that was an interesting extension. I mean, like if he's your worst offensive lineman, maybe, but like he's not even.
I think they did upgrade the interior this year. So they're like kind of, it's not like a good interior. It's fine, but it's good enough that if they can get a couple of tackles in here, or at least get one even. And just,
Well, one of them
decent,
was they have a guard who developed, they drafted last year, who developed a year,
yeah.
and then they signed James Daniels.
And they signed Mason Cole. Like these are like your interior guys that are replacement level. Like you don't have any Brandon Sheriffs or Quentin Nelsons, but like you can run the ball and you're gonna be decent.
But you can't have that and then that
No
tackle
tackle, the
pair
tackle
be on
pair,
the
yeah.
outside.
So I think the thing that's tough about this is like you're probably gonna wait for a tackle to develop here, but because they're not really gonna be picking a spot where they're gonna get like a clear day one guy who's definitely gonna be good. I mean, even like Andrew Thomases, who we think are like that, can take some time. But yeah, that has to be. It just has to be. It's been 3 years now we've been saying this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Agreed. I mean, they had such a good offensive line, and they spent high picks on them. I mean, they drafted. They got Villanueva on a prayer and turned him in from like a tight end to a good offensive tackle. Not great, but good. But they spent first round picks on DeCastro, on Pouncey, and who else? They had a couple other solid players, and they just let them all age out, retire, and just never really made a concerted effort to replace them. So I think they must know that that's got to change.
Marcus Gilbert.
I
don't know if he was.
He was like a second round.
They had Ramon Foster. He was good.
And yeah, I don't remember where the heck they found him. We're going back like over a decade now.
Yeah, no, it's like 6 years. I'm like looking at some like old rosters, but yeah, it was a good O-line. So good even that Marquise Pouncey is going to make the Hall of Fame, even though he probably shouldn't have made nearly as many Pro Bowls as he did. That's a whole other thing we could talk about. But yes, they had a really good O-line for a long time, and they've kind of just ignored it largely outside of some of these cheaper free agents and late draft picks. But now, which is interesting, even though I don't know if Najee Harris is really changing the run game for them, but it was a big part of last night's win for them. And then Kenny Pickett's kind of done the Tom Brady thing where he has now 2 weeks in a row just late game heroics. Had an excellent drive last night.
Yeah, he has a personality for it, which I didn't look at the quarterbacks that closely last year. I'll be perfectly honest. I didn't dive into the personality wise. Sometimes it's hard to find that stuff. Sometimes it's even hard to find interviews where they're even asked questions that are deep enough for them to give any answer other than like ultra cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
So like there was the only guy that I was like, this is not a guy I'm in on at all was Corral. The Corral was, I mean, like listening to these guys talk is important. It really is, especially at the position they play. I mean, you can take it with a grain of salt with a lot of others, but like quarterback, if you can't speak relatively eloquently, like you're gonna have a hard time leading a team. And it was like very clear to me that he's not going to be a guy. Maybe I'm speaking too early and he'll turn into one, but he seemed like a doofus to me. Like when you actually just hear him talk, you can see when you get a little bit more Pickett now that he's got some more to him, and just the way that he plays on the field. I think he's got a personality that is going to help him develop. So of course the Steelers took their quarterback at 20th overall.
Yeah.
And they were one of my winners of the draft too. Like, so I didn't include them in like my multi-year breakdown like I did with the Eagles, Jets, and Ravens. But I did like a draft night. I was like, coming away with your quarterback at pick 20, I think you have to consider that a win, at least right now. Now
especially
it looks like it was.
We really were like thinking that they were going to trade up for Malik Willis, like above Carolina or something, which would have been a major trade. That was a weird draft night, but yeah, we thought that was going to happen. And it's so weird because obviously that quarterback class was not very good. I think it got maybe a little bit more pinned as like this horrific class than it should have been. But yeah, they just waited for their guy and they got their selection. I have to feel that they were comfortable taking more than one quarterback at that spot. just because if somebody easily could have taken one before them. They're just not a trade up for a quarterback type team, you know. So it makes sense they didn't.
Yeah, no, I agree. If they come off of over a decade of Ben Roethlisberger to a decade of Kenny Pickett being a good quarterback, then that just sounds like Steelers MO to me. But so I guess that's it. I mean, I thought the Jets were going to do it. It just didn't happen. Offensive line was awful, and it's tough because they've made so many investments since Joe Douglas has been there. They've spent 2 first-round picks on offensive line, 2 fourth-round picks on offensive line. They've spent money on multiple guys, and it's just injuries. You know, even some of the draft picks have worked out, but it's just injuries. Max Mitchell, blood clots, out. Elijah Vera-Tucker, torn bicep, out. You know what I mean? Like, even their hits are gone. Becton looked like a stud year 1. He's missed 2 entire seasons now to injury. It's like you kind of can't catch a break, but it was bad. And then and Mike White just wasn't accurate, and that's his trademark. So I'm just sure that the ribs were more of an issue than, you know, maybe medically cleared to play, but like
pain.
Yeah. So
stuff.
Yep. I mean, is there anybody here? We didn't really talk about the Chargers, but I think that's it. I think we talked about pretty much every other. Well, we didn't talk about the Titans, but
I don't want to talk about the Titans.
I'm not dedicating time to the Titans right now. Sorry. So, I mean, the Chargers are really the only one that we haven't talked about, except for just like a sentence in passing. So do you want to hit on them quick before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, I just think they're like quietly a team that could make some noise. Going on the road is going to be tough. Some of these teams to play, and they might have a bit of a dogfight if they go up against Jacksonville in the first playoff round, who they already lost to by like 28 points earlier this year too. But Herbert at his best, again, like they have a shot against anyone. I think they have some defensive pieces, maybe more than some of the other teams on this list. O-line's a big issue. I'd say even more so than, you know, the Bengals, Bills, and Chiefs, but they have, you know, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and a mobile QB. But offensively, I think their offense is obviously just Joe Lombardi is a head scratcher sometimes with the play design. And defensively, Brandon Staley, I think, does do a very good job limiting big plays, giving them kind of a high floor in terms of defense and allowing their offense to go win football games. They're going to be highly talked about in at least 2 weeks here because, you know, there's going to be some of these analytics decisions in the playoffs. And we'll see how they go because depending on whether they make convert these fourth downs or not, there's going to be a lot of media discussion about what the fate of the Chargers is. And I think the coaching staff's safe regardless. I think they might end up looking for another offensive coordinator, but it's interesting because they really have kind of backed off of the analytics this year. Like they really just haven't done it to a large extent, but we're still kind of pitting them as that team.
It's the weird thing, and we'll have to have a longer conversation about this another time. The weird thing about fourth down analytics is that all of the analytics are currently built off of a formula in which teams rarely do it. So the success rate is also coming from like such a small overall attempt level. And so if you change something,
well, I think there are a lot of teams that do it a good amount. I think there's an argument that people make that it's like, oh, the good teams do it more and they convert. That's not true because there are bad teams that go for it and convert and they just lose anyways because they're bad, you know? Cleveland, for example, is a team that like has gone for a fourth down a good amount this year and benefited from it, but there's a bad football team. It doesn't matter, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think it's just good football team, bad football team. I think good offensive line, bad offensive line probably has a lot to do with it.
Probably matters, but like that correlates with, success rate for sure. But if you're the Chargers, like their big thing this year has been they've been trying to hit on like quick pass plays with Herbert, and there are ways to make that work. they don't do them. They run slants and curls, and that's kind of it. Like, you could have a pick play, or you can run a quick screen, or do stuff like that. I think their execution is poor, and that's kind of their problem.
I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think, if you want to be a good fourth down team with what they have, I feel like they should just give the ball to Herbert and make him run stretch a few times, convert a few times on that, and then it's just a threat. Then it's a threat every time you run fourth and whatever. And that basically forces linebackers and safeties not to like smash up the middle or whatever, or if you have that receiver, going for like a super quick comeback, then it actually it forces that corner to keep his eye on the quarterback as he running a sweep in my direction. You know what I mean? And like, Herbert is 100% big enough and fast enough that he could do that. But anyway, again, conversation for another day. But I mean, he's a good enough player to help them win, or give them a shot to win in, I think, any one of these games. And I'm glad that his skill players have gotten healthy enough that they're not just a total trash fire. Because for him to operate without his best offensive lineman and all his good receivers was tough to watch, especially because he was trying to make it work, and then he got rib injuries, and it took him a while to get back from that too. So, man, so the draft orders gotten kind of interesting. I mean, right now, I think we can probably comfortably assume that most of the teams in the top 5 are not going to win a game in this next week. So it looks like it's going to be Houston, Chicago, Seattle, Arizona, Indy, Detroit.
Indy plays Houston. So
they do? Okay.
So if Houston, another Nico, scared of this happening because Houston's kind of his second team. If the Colts, the way they've been playing, continue to play the way they're playing, I would not be shocked if the Texans beat them and lose out on the number 1 pick here.
Well, I think honestly the Colts are actively tanking to get a quarterback at this point.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Which is even more important that the Texans don't win this game, because right now they have Bryce Young if they want him. If they win this game,
which why wouldn't they?
Yeah, really. I mean, that Super Bowl was amazing. I mean, but if they win this game and they become the number 2 pick, someone's going to trade up to Chicago to get Bryce Young. And it could still be them. Like, they could send picks to move up a spot, but you don't want to have to do that.
Yeah, it seems kind of counterproductive. I'm not sure going 3-13-1 is a much better culture setter than going 2-14-1 at this point.
Yep.
I don't know. I guess we'll see, because there will be some shuffling, because there's a fair amount of 6-10 and 7-9 teams that one will go one way, the other will go another way. So this will move around a little bit. Anybody else here? I mean, I think we should do the quarterback carousel episode on Thursday and look at all these guys that are moving around. But I mean, at this point, we're getting there. We don't have any games left in college football except for the championship. So based on what you've seen, how many quarterbacks do you think are going to be first round type of guys? First round to high.
So for my grading, I'm going to have, it's going to be, I would say right now I expect 4 to get in. I haven't really finished my grading. I think I might end up being 4. They might be different 4. There could be a 5th depending on some of these guys' post-draft processes. I don't think it's going to be Hendon Hooker, but because of his injury. But I think there's a kid from Stanford who's interesting. Tanner McKee, he would be like a late. But I think right now, like Levis, Stroud, and Young are like pretty likely to all be top 8 picks, depending on how you feel about that. It is what it is. And then I think Richardson's probably going to go somewhere later in the first round. It's just like a project.
Mm-hmm. So if you've got, let's say we've got Bryce Young going to Houston and they keep that pick, then I'm guessing Stroud, after the way he played, is probably going to be the next one.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I personally feel like it's him for sure. I don't know how the Colts feel about Levis. Levis is very much going to be depends on the team, and if a team really likes him, they're going to take him high. And I don't agree with it, but if the Colts really like Levis, they're going to take Levis. If I'm them, I'm taking Stroud. The Panthers supposedly are enamored with Levis. We'll see like what their plan is there because I mean I think they would probably take Stroud if they couldn't get Levis. But Atlanta, are they looking at quarterbacks? I don't know. The Lions,
Vegas.
yeah, Vegas. I don't know. If the Lions don't make the playoffs, are they thinking about it? Like maybe.
I mean that's tough. Like for me, I'm comfortable with Seattle going with Geno because
Yeah.
I think he's actually elevated at times their offense. So I don't think you need to move off of that. The Lions, though, that's a tough one because I'm not sure Goff is elevated at any point, and as good as he's been, it's all been extremely within structure.
Yeah.
I don't think their offensive line's about to get any worse.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think-
especially like thinking about if they lose this effective playoff game to Green Bay, and like Rodgers' supporting cast is not great, and Goff like has quite honestly a really good supporting cast right now. Like it doesn't look great if you lose that game.
You know, I think just defensively, they just need guys.
Yeah.
They just need dudes.
But I mean, you have another first round pick, and you
got 2 first round picks, yeah. So
Yeah,
I mean,
so, I
I think we're all aware that they need to add a cornerback, and I
Yep.
think we're all aware that they need to add linebacker, and they could probably stand to add an interior defensive lineman as well.
Mhm.
So linebacker you could probably come back to in the second round. I think this is a good D-line class, so
Mhm.
you know,
Well, I mean, the 17 to really the 15 to like 25 range, we might see like 6 corners get drafted.
mhm.
Like that's like corner central in this board. So like I would almost feel like certain that they should pencil in that 17 pick for like a corner. Like it's going to be where they want to take one of those guys.
So it'll just be, do they want to go quarterback or maybe interior defensive lineman at 6?
I think that's probably a discussion. Yeah.
And then in Atlanta, maybe they are going quarterback. That's a
If
weird
not,
one.
it's also D line probably, and I mean like quietly wide receiver, but they're a really weird spot because I do think Arthur Smith's a good coach, but they just don't have the talent to like compete right now. And it's
I'm not sure I've loved how they've managed themselves so
Yeah.
far. I need to have a closer look at them again.
I
because
liked their draft last year. It didn't have the immediate impact that I thought it could have had. They're a bit of ways away from like fully building up that roster.
Well,
and
you know, it's just like they haven't they have an identity as far as what they are and what they want to do, but I don't see that identity having been built through the draft at all so far. I
Mhm.
don't see a stamp on this team of like, this is the position group that we care about. Like their highest investment has been in a receiving tight end that they haven't really featured, and at least not this year, and a big wide receiver who's been good, who I really liked, honestly. But I mean, they're a running team, though. Like they're
Yeah.
a running team first.
Well,
So
I
like,
think it's their O line, and I think they might pay some guys this offseason that are free agents because of that. But
yeah, but that none of those guys were drafted by them.
it was Hennessy the year before. I mean, they didn't go away from him. Mayfield hasn't even really played for them this year, has he? But he was drafted.
And he was
Yeah.
a second round pick. So I mean,
Third.
they didn't draft McGarry. They didn't draft
Tennessee.
Hennessy or Lindstrom.
Yeah.
Or
These are all guys that were built before. But I mean, you can make the argument that maybe Arthur Smith takes the job because he likes the makings of like all the young pieces they added to the O line. I don't know.
I don't know.
That's the best I can do, Max. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing devil's advocate, I get it, but I don't see a team. I mean, even AJ Terrell, like he wasn't a draft pick by them too. So, and he's been him, Grady Jarrett. It's like most of their best players are players that were not drafted by this regime, and it's like I know it's only been 2 seasons, but I haven't seen anything that makes me like, okay, I'm into the way that this is going. Anyway, we'll see. I like Desmond Ritter actually, so I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
I'll
I
do
mean, I think
something.
they probably are. I don't think any of the quarterbacks on the board that are going to be available are like guys that you want to throw in that situation. I think they got to do another year Ritter. If he's bad, you're probably back in the quarterback space again, and you've given your young players another year to develop, and maybe you draft some more good guys. And it's kind of annoying because I feel like they wanted this upcoming year, to be a year where they can take a jump, and I think it's going to be they've pushed it back another year because of
How they've
really
managed things.
their lack of investment at like taking shots at like important positions and like really allowing some of their better players like to take chances on it. Like taking a chance on like Pitts and saying, okay, we're gonna play you as like a receiver in this game, just see what happens. Like, because you have to just see like what the high end outcome of that is, so you can build the identity. And I think they've kind of just played everything safe and just hope that nothing goes terribly wrong. I guess it hasn't, but they also
It
aren't
hasn't
really
gone
doing
right
anything
either.
good. Yeah, like I think.
All right, so here's a fun what if. Currently, the Jets are picking 13th, and
Mhm.
Washington is picking 14th.
Uh-huh.
And would they be a spot where one of them would take a swing on Anthony Richardson?
So I just think the Jets are more likely to be in the trade market because I think that they're going to be a very attractive spot for a lot of people. And I think it's tough because I ideally like I could come up with reasons for Richardson for both of those teams. Really, it's a little early for me, but as a quarterback, like I wouldn't be upset with either team doing it. I think the Jets are gonna want to win now because of what they have. I think Washington's also gonna want to win now because of what they have. And I honestly think this offseason for Washington is gonna be really like tough because I think what's gonna happen is they're effectively gonna give Rivera another year, and I think they're gonna have to also be in a situation where they're gonna have to attack quarterback, and just because of the organization and like all the stuff that's going on, like I don't, unlike the Jets, like I don't think they're capable of really bringing in somebody that gives them any high end outcomes. So,
All right, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not really interested in anybody who's available.
well, Derek Carr and Garoppolo probably available.
No thanks.
Tom Brady,
That's the only one that I would be
Aaron
interested in.
Rodgers,
Aaron Rodgers is not going anywhere. His
or
contract
Jordan.
basically dictates that
Okay,
it's not.
Jordan Love, because they're gonna have to like get rid of one of those guys, right?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. All right. Well, I think one of them's got a good chance to go. We'll see. I mean, they're gonna get offers. It's about if they want to bite on one of them,
Mhm.
and then
I think
probably not
I think
Lamar.
they're in a spot where it's like they want to compete. Just as a brief aside on Green Bay, I think Rodgers is there because of that contract. It's huge. It's massive. He brings so much drama with him that I'm not sure anybody would want to make the trade investment at his age.
It's just like their issue is they have so many players up for contract this year. They already extended Jenkins, but
Mm-hmm.
their cap thing this offseason is not like, I mean, you probably know more about it than I do, but it's not an easy one.
Well, I'll have to refresh myself on it real quick, but
they're gonna have to cut some veterans who are making money to create space.
They are over the cap by about $5 million projected. Rodgers is already, his cap hit is about as low as it can be. Bakhtiari, yeah, there's not a lot of money to be found there.
Like Bakhtiari,
but that's the thing. You got to realize something, that if Aaron Rodgers is traded, they are going to lose $67 million in cap space. So it's like,
I think
that's not
post-June
really an
1st is
option.
a little different, but post June 1st might be a little different. I don't really know.
Yeah, but the issue is that nobody's going to wait for after June 1 to trade for a quarterback, because that's after the draft.
I mean, unless they agree to something way before that.
No team would ever do that. It's too much of a risk, because then what if you back out?
If they don't back out, you get Aaron Rodgers.
All right, look.
Sometimes you gotta make that call, like,
First of all, post June 1 trade, they are saving $1 million. And let me see, does he have?
well, it's also about if they really want Jordan Love to be their long-term quarterback, they're gonna have to pay him like money, probably, because you can't just tag guys at this point that you haven't seen play at that position. At least it would be tough to.
When does his prorated bonus kick in? He has some kind of bonus. I'm going to look at Spotrac because it's not clear enough, because he's also going to have a bonus that kicks in. So it means they're going to pay him in early offseason to then go somewhere else in June. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they signed up for him for multiple years with this deal. They did not put themselves in a position. Yeah. Yeah, he'll get bonus money in the offseason that they would have to pay. He is going to be a Packer next year. So then it's just about Love, and it's like my question is, how much would it cost to get a backup who is as good as Jordan Love?
I don't know. Probably at least like a second.
Well, I mean, like, if you're not trading, like, so say they trade away Jordan Love and then they've got to get a backup quarterback.
I don't know.
Wouldn't you rather have Jordan Love at, let's see.
Yeah, I mean, you might.
Wouldn't you rather have Jordan Love, whose base salary for next year is basically,
yeah, you would,
$2.3 million?
Right, you're convincing me. I got it. Okay.
Why would you want to move off of him? Like,
yeah.
What I would do is I would just decline the 5th-year option and then keep him as your backup.
Because if Rodgers gets hurt, you probably have a shot still because he's looked decent, and it makes sense. Okay.
And then if Rodgers retires, then you like Love and you slap the franchise tag on him and you operate from there. Yes, is it financially, like, long term? Is it as efficient? No, but it's like, I don't think there's any reason to move off of a first-round pick who's actually looked good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So those guys are probably not available. So I think the Garoppolo, Carr, and Brady are like the guys.
I don't want Garoppolo.
I think for the Jets that makes the most sense, personally.
To me, it doesn't. I mean, look at the AFC, dude. We just talked about how you have to go through Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence,
could not compete in that conference.
Justin Herbert, and Lamar Jackson. And you really think Garoppolo is going to get that done?
I think they have like a decent chance. Yeah. I think that they're like more talented roster than a lot of those teams. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I think that they have it.
Yeah, they are. But I mean,
but that's what the Niners are too. And I know the NFC is not that good this year, but last year it was. Last year the NFC was what the AFC is now. And a lot of those quarterbacks left and or retired and or got injured, or they just had organizational dysfunction. If you draft Richardson, and this is the comparison we're making right now, right? It's 2 years, like, I don't think you're playing that guy immediately at all. Like, I think there's a legitimate chance he's not even a quarterback, because I think he's unfortunately just not been used that way. And I think you want him to be a quarterback, but I think if year 3, like, he just hasn't been able to make the transition to an NFL offense, you like start asking questions about, like, okay, is he like a tight end? And I don't think I'm the only person who thinks that. I think that's like an actual prevailing thought process with him. He's a really, really good athlete who could be a quarterback, which is awesome. If it works, it's great. But like, Josh Allen was probably more along the lines of a guy you actually could see become an NFL QB than this guy. And Allen was a gigantic project.
Okay, I mean, we'll see. I'm not really interested in.
I think if he's your starter year one, you're never throwing the ball. And
I'm
that's
fine
fine,
with that.
maybe. But like,
I mean, I'm kind of okay with that. I mean, like, if you've got, all right, so let's say you make you rework your roster a little bit, and you make a little bit more offensive line investment. You get Elijah Vera-Tucker coming back next year, and you go into the offseason with a combination of Mekhi Becton, Dwayne Brown, Max Mitchell as your tackles, with AVT as a guy who can move out the tackle if you need, you know what I mean? And then you add a little bit more depth to the interior. You got Breece Hall, you got Zonovan Knight, you got Michael Carter, and you still have both tight ends on the roster.
like I like ideally, like yes, like I think you could win games with this, but I don't think it puts him in a better spot than a Garoppolo does, where you can just run kind of the Niners offense like you've been doing already, really.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much got to do it for me. We've already gone like pretty long here. But
they will be teams that are in those discussions, and I think both might even be considering trading up for guys if it becomes possible, because
this is the kind of conversation we usually have off air after the show.
Yeah, this is.
But yeah, I don't know. Look, I don't love the idea of just signing up for a player who's like, you're guaranteeing that at best they are going to be like the 7th best quarterback. I think that you want to at least take a swing on that. So, all right.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll talk about it more. We'll come together. All right. Nick, let everybody know where they can find you, man. And we'll be back this Thursday to have the full quarterback carousel conversation.
It's at Nicholas Sports on Twitter. That's pretty much it for now. Just keeping track of what's going on and posting content there.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter at TheMaxDean. And of course, thank you to Noah Ashley at No Ashtray Sports. And that is going to do it for us today. All right. This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.